In the small, secluded village of Eldergrove, nestled deep within a forest that seemed to swallow light and exhale shadows, a sense of unease had settled like a shroud. The village, long forgotten by time and progress, was an eerie relic of bygone days. Its inhabitants clung to their superstitions and rituals, for they had good reason to believe in the things that lurked in the darkness. The village square, once a lively gathering place, now stood desolate under the moon's cold gaze. The dilapidated houses, with their rotting wooden frames and broken windows, seemed to lean toward each other as if sharing whispered secrets. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and decaying leaves, a scent that mingled with something far more sinister. At the edge of Eldergrove lay the old cemetery, a place avoided by the villagers at all costs. Tombstones, some leaning and others toppled, jutted from the ground like broken teeth. The mausoleum, a grand but crumbling structure, loomed over the graves, its entrance a gaping maw that promised darkness within. The villagers spoke of ghastly things that stirred in the cemetery at night, of ghouls that rose from their graves to feast upon the living. Among the villagers, there was a story, passed down through generations, of a cursed family. The Vryslavs, once prominent landowners, had been accused of practicing dark rituals. Their fall from grace was swift and brutal, culminating in a massacre that left their estate in ruins. It was said that the patriarch, Vladislav Vryslav, had sworn vengeance with his dying breath, cursing the village and vowing to rise from the grave. As the years turned into decades, the Vryslav estate became a source of dread and speculation. No one dared to venture near, especially after sundown. But as the village's livestock began to die mysteriously, their carcasses found drained of blood, and as strange illnesses spread among the villagers, whispers of the curse grew louder. Fear took root, and the villagers began to suspect that Vladislav had returned, not as a man, but as a ghoul. One particularly cold and moonless night, a group of young men, emboldened by drink and desperation, decided to uncover the truth. They armed themselves with torches and crude weapons, determined to put an end to the horror that plagued their home. Among them was Jacob, a sturdy lad with a fierce determination to protect his family. His younger sister, Anya, had fallen ill, and he could no longer bear to see her suffer. The journey to the cemetery was fraught with tension. The forest seemed to close in around them, each step forward accompanied by the rustling of unseen creatures. When they finally reached the cemetery, the sight of the graves and the imposing mausoleum filled them with dread. But they pressed on, guided by the belief that they could end the curse. As they approached the mausoleum, a cold wind howled through the trees, carrying with it the faint stench of decay. The entrance to the crypt yawned before them, an invitation to the abyss. Jacob led the way, his torch casting flickering shadows on the stone walls. The air grew colder as they descended, and the sound of dripping water echoed in the dark. Deep within the crypt, they found a stone sarcophagus, its lid ajar. Jacob hesitated, a chill running down his spine. With a deep breath, he pushed the lid aside, revealing an empty coffin. The sight filled him with a sense of impending doom. Suddenly, a low, guttural growl echoed through the chamber, and the torches flickered violently. The men turned to see a figure emerging from the shadows. Tall and gaunt, with eyes that glowed like embers and skin as pale as death, Vladislav Vryslav stood before them. His mouth twisted into a cruel smile, revealing sharp, elongated teeth. The torchlight danced on his blood-stained clothes, the scent of iron filling the air. "Welcome, children," Vladislav hissed, his voice a venomous whisper. "You have come to my domain, seeking to end what cannot be ended." Panic seized the men, and they stumbled backward. Vladislav moved with a speed that defied the eye, appearing in their midst. He grasped one of the men by the throat, lifting him effortlessly. The man's scream was cut short as Vladislav sank his teeth into his neck, drinking deeply. The others watched in horror as their companion's life was drained away. Jacob, driven by a surge of adrenaline, swung his torch at Vladislav. The ghoul released his victim, turning his fiery gaze upon Jacob. "Foolish boy," Vladislav snarled. "Do you think you can defy me?" With a strength born of desperation, Jacob plunged the burning torch into Vladislav's chest. The ghoul recoiled, a roar of pain echoing through the crypt. Smoke rose from the wound, but Vladislav did not fall. Instead, he laughed, a sound that sent shivers down Jacob's spine. "You cannot destroy me," Vladislav declared. "I am bound to this place by the blood of your ancestors." And now, you shall join me in eternal night." As Vladislav lunged, Jacob closed his eyes, bracing for the end. But instead of the fatal bite, he felt a rush of cold air. Opening his eyes, he saw that the crypt was empty. Vladislav had vanished, leaving only the echo of his laughter. The surviving men fled the cemetery, their minds shattered by the encounter. When they returned to the village, they found it in chaos. Anya lay on her bed, her skin deathly pale, and her eyes sunken. She whispered Jacob's name, her voice barely audible. Jacob knelt beside her, tears streaming down his face. "Anya, I'm here." "Jacob," she gasped. He's coming for us all." Before Jacob could respond, the door to their home burst open. Vladislav stood in the doorway, his eyes glowing with malevolent hunger. The curse of Eldergrove was far from over, and the true horror had only just begun. The figure in the doorway was a harbinger of doom. Vladislav Ryslov stood tall, his presence dominating the small room. His eyes burned with a malevolent light, and a cruel smile played on his lips as he took a step forward. Jacob instinctively shielded his sister, though he knew it was futile against such a force. "Stay back," Jacob shouted, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and defiance. He grabbed a makeshift weapon, a piece of wood with a sharp end, hoping to fend off the ghoul. Vladislav laughed, a sound devoid of any warmth. "Do you truly believe you can protect her?" "Jacob, I am centuries old, bound by the darkest of curses. Your efforts are meaningless." Anya's labored breathing filled the room, each inhale a struggle against the dark force that seemed to envelop her. Jacob felt the weight of helplessness crushing him, but he refused to give up. He lunged at Vladislav, thrusting the wooden stake toward the ghoul's heart. Vladislav caught the stake midair, snapping it effortlessly. His grip on Jacob's wrist was ironclad, and he pulled the young man close, their faces mere inches apart. "You have spirit, boy, but spirit alone will not save you." As if to demonstrate his point, Vladislav threw Jacob across the room. He collided with the wall, the impact knocking the wind out of him. Gasping for breath, Jacob struggled to his feet, determined not to leave Anya to face this monster alone. Suddenly, a new presence made itself known. From the shadows, an old woman emerged, her appearance as unexpected as it was unsettling. She was frail and hunched, her weathered face etched with the lines of countless years. Her eyes, however, were sharp and piercing, filled with a knowing that transcended time. "Vladislav," she called out, her voice a rasp that seemed to scrape against the air. "Your time here is not yet complete." Vladislav turned, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. "Mara," he sneered, "you dare to interfere." Mara stepped forward, her movements deliberate and purposeful. "I am the keeper of the old ways, Vladislav. You may have cursed this village, but there are powers at work greater than yours." Jacob, clutching his side, watched the exchange with a mix of hope and confusion. "Who are you?" he managed to ask. Mara glanced at him briefly. "I am Mara, the last of the witches who once protected this land, and I am here to help you." Vladislav's laughter echoed through the room. "Help? You are but a relic, Mara. Your powers are diminished, your influence waned." Mara did not waver. "Perhaps, but even a relic can hold great power when wielded correctly." With a sudden, swift motion, Mara drew a vial from her cloak and hurled it at Vladislav. The glass shattered against his chest, releasing a thick, acrid smoke. Vladislav recoiled, a guttural scream escaping his lips as the smoke enveloped him, burning through his flesh. "Go, now," Mara shouted to Jacob. "Take your sister and flee. There is a place in the forest where you will be safe." Jacob did not need to be told twice. He gathered Anya into his arms, her frail body light and cold. With a final glance at the writhing figure of Vladislav and the stoic form of Mara, he fled into the night. The forest was a maze of shadows and eerie sounds. Branches clawed at Jacob as he stumbled through the underbrush, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Anya clung to him weakly, her voice a faint whisper against his ear. "Jacob, where are we going?" "Somewhere safe," Jacob promised, though he had no idea if such a place existed. He pressed on, driven by a desperate need to protect his sister. After what felt like hours, they reached a small clearing. In the center stood an ancient oak tree, its gnarled branches stretching toward the sky like skeletal fingers. Beneath its roots, a small, hidden entrance led to an underground chamber. Jacob hesitated, but Anya's worsening condition spurred him on. He descended into the chamber, the darkness swallowing them whole. Inside, the air was cool and still, a stark contrast to the chaos above. Jacob laid Anya down gently, his heart heavy with fear and uncertainty. "Jacob," Anya whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'm scared." He took her hand, holding it tightly. "I know, Anya, but we'll get through this. We have to." As the hours passed, Jacob kept a vigil by his sister's side. The silence was oppressive, each creak and groan of the ancient tree above them a reminder of the danger lurking outside. Exhaustion eventually claimed him, and he drifted into a restless sleep. Jacob's dreams were a tumult of fear and confusion. He saw visions of Vladislav, his eyes burning with unholy fire, and of Mara, chanting ancient incantations. He saw the village, shrouded in darkness, its people consumed by the curse. And he saw Anya, standing alone in a desolate landscape, calling out to him with outstretched arms. He awoke with a start, his heart pounding in his chest. The chamber was as dark as before, but something felt different. Anya was gone. Panic surged through him. "Anya!" he called, his voice echoing off the stone walls. There was no response. He scrambled to his feet, his mind racing with horrible possibilities. Emerging from the underground chamber, Jacob found the clearing bathed in the pale light of dawn. The first rays of the sun cast long shadows, making the forest seem even more otherworldly. Desperation clawed at him as he searched for any sign of his sister. Then he saw her, standing at the edge of the clearing. Anya's back was to him, her posture unnaturally rigid. Jacob approached cautiously, his heart in his throat. "Anya, what are you doing?" She turned slowly, and Jacob's blood ran cold. Anya's eyes, once vibrant and full of life, were now dark and hollow, reflecting nothing but the abyss. Her lips, tinged with a faint trace of blood, twisted into a smile that was not her own. "Jacob," she said, her voice a haunting echo of her former self. "He has me now." Before Jacob could react, a figure emerged from the shadows behind Anya. Vladislav, his presence as imposing as ever, placed a hand on her shoulder. "Your sister is mine, Jacob, and soon, you will be too." Jacob felt a surge of rage and despair. "No, I'll never let you take her." Vladislav's laughter was a dark symphony. "You have no choice. The curse binds us all." As the sun continued to rise, casting its light upon the clearing, Jacob realized the true horror of their situation. Vladislav was not merely a ghoul to be defeated, he was a force of darkness that had woven itself into the very fabric of their lives. And now, with Anya under his thrall, the curse had only just begun to reveal its true depths. The villagers of Eldergrove would soon learn that the horrors of the night were not confined to their dreams. The darkness that plagued their village was alive, and it was hungry. The fight for survival had only just begun, and Jacob knew that he would need to uncover the secrets of the past to save his sister and perhaps the entire village from the clutches of Vladislav's eternal night. Jacob's heart shattered as he watched Anya, his beloved sister, standing by Vladislav's side. Her transformation was a cruel mockery of the vibrant girl she once was. Desperation coursed through him, but deep down, he knew the truth. The darkness that had taken her was far beyond his power to combat alone. Vladislav's eyes gleamed with triumph. "You see, Jacob, resistance is futile. Your sister belongs to the night now, and soon, you will too." Jacob felt a surge of hopelessness but also a spark of resolve. He could not abandon Anya, not without a fight. Summoning every ounce of courage, he reached into his pocket, fingers closing around the small silver crucifix his mother had given him years ago. He held it up defiantly, stepping toward Vladislav. "Let her go," Jacob shouted, his voice raw with emotion. "Release her, or I'll end this curse once and for all." Vladislav's laughter was a chilling sound that echoed through the clearing. "End the curse? You cannot comprehend the power you face." With a swift motion, Vladislav's hand shot out, knocking the crucifix from Jacob's grasp. It fell to the ground, its light dimming in the shadow of the ghoul. Jacob lunged for it, but Vladislav was faster, his grip like iron as he seized Jacob by the throat. "You cannot defeat me with relics," Vladislav hissed, his breath cold and foul. "Your fate was sealed the moment you set foot in my domain." Jacob struggled, the edges of his vision darkening as Vladislav's grip tightened. He could feel the life being choked out of him, his strength ebbing away. But then, from the corner of his eye, he saw Anya move. "Jacob," she whispered, her voice a faint glimmer of her former self. "Fight him." With a final, desperate effort, Jacob drove his knee into Vladislav's abdomen. The ghoul loosened his grip just enough for Jacob to break free. Gasping for air, Jacob grabbed the crucifix once more, holding it up between him and Vladislav. "You may have power," Jacob said, his voice trembling but resolute, "but love is stronger than any curse." For a moment, Vladislav seemed to falter, his expression darkening with anger. "Foolish boy, love cannot save you." But Jacob didn't falter. He advanced, pressing the crucifix against Vladislav's chest. Smoke rose from the contact, and the ghoul screamed, a sound that reverberated through the forest. Jacob pushed harder, forcing Vladislav back step by step. Anya watched, her eyes flickering between the darkness that held her and the brother who fought so desperately to save her. "Jacob," she whispered again, her voice filled with sorrow and longing. Vladislav's strength began to wane under the relentless assault of the crucifix. With a final, guttural cry, he lashed out, sending Jacob sprawling to the ground. The crucifix flew from his hand, landing several feet away. Panting, Vladislav straightened, his form wavering like a mirage. "You think you've won, Jacob. The curse is eternal. You cannot save her." Jacob crawled toward the crucifix, his vision blurring with tears and exhaustion. He knew he had to reach it, but his body felt like lead. Just as his fingers brushed the silver, Vladislav was upon him again, lifting him effortlessly and throwing him against the ancient oak. The impact knocked the wind out of Jacob, pain radiating through his entire body. He slumped against the tree, barely able to move. Vladislav approached slowly, savoring the moment. "Goodbye, Jacob," Vladislav said, raising his hand to deliver the final blow. But then Anya stepped between them, her eyes filled with a fierce determination. "No, Vladislav. This ends now." The ghoul hesitated, his eyes narrowing. "Anya, you are mine." "I am no one's," she replied, and with a sudden, surprising strength, she seized the crucifix from the ground and thrust it into Vladislav's chest. A piercing scream filled the air as Vladislav convulsed, his body writhing in agony. The crucifix glowed brightly, burning through the ghoul's flesh. Anya held on, her grip unwavering even as Vladislav's form began to disintegrate. "Anya, no!" Jacob cried, reaching out to her, but it was too late. With a final, blinding flash of light, Vladislav exploded into ash, the remnants of his curse dissipating into the air. Anya collapsed to the ground, the crucifix still clutched in her hand. Jacob crawled to her side, gathering her in his arms. Her body was cold, her breathing shallow. "Anya, please, stay with me." She opened her eyes, a faint smile on her lips. "Jacob, I love you. Always remember that." Tears streamed down Jacob's face as he held her close. "I love you too, Anya. Please don't leave me." But her eyes fluttered shut, and with a final, shuddering breath, she was gone. Jacob wept, the weight of his loss crushing him. The dawn broke over the horizon, casting a pale light over the clearing, but for Jacob, the world had never felt darker. The curse of Vladislav Vraislav was broken, but at a terrible cost. Eldergrove would heal, and life would continue, but the memory of that night, and the sacrifice of a brave girl who faced the darkness, would haunt Jacob forever. As the sun rose higher, Jacob remained by Anya's side, his heart heavy with grief. The forest, once a place of terror, now stood silent, a witness to the tragic end of a tale that would be told for generations to come.